few days after I was there, and here's a good get well note from every child that's on the picture. I'm going to pass these things around, and everybody look at them. Some of my stuff's ready to fall apart, but we'll still look at it. And we'll start it around, and we'll get it in one place in the end. Now, as far as questions goes, kids, there isn't such a thing as a stupid question. If it's on your mind, you ask it. It wouldn't be on your mind if it was stupid. For instance, one of the first times I talked to the middle school in Bemidji, the little girl, first question I got, she put her hand up and she says, was there cannibalism in the prison camp? Questions like that. Another boy, fifth grade boy, he spoke up and he said, how far would you lead a fighter plane if he was shooting at it to hit it? His teacher thought he was being funny and was going to stop him, but no, he was a duck and a goose hunter and a bird hunter, so he did have a good legitimate question. My answer to that one was, we was traveling 300 miles an hour, and if he's going by us from the front to the back and he's traveling 400, figure it out. The answer's there, but it does take a little digging. Now, I do like to, let's start this thing around if you'd like to look at it. That was taken at the Soloway Elementary School down by Bemidji.
I'm going to stop you just for a second. I see your microphone's down here, and I think it might be easy. You won't have to use your extend your voice.
Oh, did you get it?
Yep.
For some reason, I can't behave. Now, one of my things I like to do is to point out to the kids who I am. I'm not somebody a bit different than any child sitting here. Here's a picture of me. I'm the smallest boy on here, taken in 1925, I suppose it was. And I got my stuff mixed up again. Here's a picture of me just 15 years later, going to war. Take them and pass them around. And it's quite interesting when you stop to think about it. Many of my gunners, especially the ones in the ball turret on the plane, was 16-year-old kids. That newspaper that I brought of Bemidji's up was that man that's with me on that picture went in at 16. He's from Warren. And I'm sure you all know where Warren is. He did as good a job as any man that was there. I was called an old man because I was 22 when I was shot down. Now, we'll get to the prison part of it later, but I do want to tell you who I am. I was born in 1919. I lived through the roaring 20s, as they called them. Money then was just like it is now. And in 1929, the stock markets all broke. And the economy went bad, and through the 30s there was no money anyplace. If you got any, it wasn't any value to it. I worked for 2 summers. The summer I was 12, I believe, and 13 for $10 a month at the resort. I got $10 a month and my board and a chance to sleep in the attic, and I put in at least 16 hours every day. But it did more during those bad times than the $10 because it took me away from my father's table, and there was other kids in the family. And he had no way to make money to set the table either. From that, we moved up to the area north of Bemidji, 30 miles north, just south of Red Lake. In 34. I bought my first land there when I was 16. I sold the land a few years ago for a few dollars more than I bought it for. I bought it for $2 an acre and had 30 years to pay for it in. I was only 16. I had that land when the war started, and I had a few cattle on it, and I was deferred from the service. I didn't have to go because I was supposedly farming. That part was fine until fall come. I was single, and I picked up the paper, and they'd taken a man about 20 years old with a wife and a new baby. That was too much for me. I had to go, so I quit farming in a hurry. From there, of course, I went through Fort Snelling, and that's where I was inducted. I have a book here with me that tells you in the 8th Air Force you had to have 2 years of college or equivalent to be in the 8th Air Force. Happens to be this little book right here. I had an 8th grade education. I was in the Air Force because they had to have a person they could take into the school and train to be an engineer on the B-17, which I spent a few weeks in airplane mechanic school, and that's what I was. That's what I went overseas for, was they couldn't take one off with all the pilots they had without the engineers. Now, I went from Fort Snelling to Florida to get my boot training. I was out in the field for about 2 hours, and they came in and pulled me out because they wanted me in school. And that's what boot training I got. But you didn't walk far in the B-17 until after I lost it. But the whole thing along the way was interesting. We had a terrible war, probably not as bad as we got right now. And the fact I went, I've lived all my life quite contented because I went. Incidentally, I might just sidetrack a minute here. It's been a few years since I did it, but I used to come to this area every Sunday and buy feeder pigs for some years when I was still working. So I'm really not a stranger up here. And I have wanted to come to this more or less out of the way places because the kids should have the same chance as the city kids. Of course, the city kids aren't very interested. But if I drop back to that 8th Air Force deal, the reason they didn't get their men with 2 years of college, that's the rich man's kid, and the rich man kid never fights the war. They found that out in a hurry. At that time, very few people got to go to college. Well, I went from airplane mechanic school, took an examination, physical, to see if I could fly. Naturally, I was a good farm boy. I could fly. I had nothing wrong with my body that wouldn't fix itself. And so I found myself in gunnery school. From gunnery school, I went to Burbank, California, and I had 2 weeks on the B-17 as the engineering end of it. From there, I went to New York by troop train and went by boat to England. We docked in Scotland. There was 17 of young men that was trained for engineers on the bombers. Now, you notice this plane here, there's a bump up on top. Any kid that wants can come and look it and touch it. That was my turret. I was on the flight deck with the pilot and co-pilot.
This one here?
Yeah. In front, that was the navigator and the bombardiers, those guns in front. And that was their compartment. When you look underneath, you see that little ball turret. A big man couldn't get in it, so naturally there was a 16-year-old kid in that ball turret because he was a little smaller. But let him have questions anytime.
Go ahead.
On the bomber bridge, were they like upside down?
I didn't do that.
Were they upside down or was that the bottom grid?
He said were the men sometimes upside down when they were swimming around in there?
The only way they could get in and out of the ball turret was to turn the gun straight down and get in from within the ship. Once the guns was up in a firing position, the man couldn't get out of the turret. There's no way. He couldn't wire a parachute in it either. He had to go back through the ship. Then the top gun, that was the radio man. And these are all 50 caliber machine guns that would fire 800 rounds a minute. The two windows on the side was the waist gunners. There was a gun on either side. And the two guns in the back was the tail gunner. This man that's on the picture with me from last Monday, that was his position. He had to crawl from where those windows are in the side on his hands and knees to get back there, and then lay on his stomach for as long as the plane was in the air. That meant if he was to get out when the plane was hit, that he had the same problem to get back up.
Could he wear a parachute on his?
Yeah, that was the tail gunner. There was 10 men on the plane when we flew with a full crew. There was 10 men on the ground that serviced it. But I will fall back just a little again. When I got to England and checked in at the field I was supposed to check in on, there were 6 men in this big barracks. I asked one of them, I said, "What bunk can I have?" He says, "You'll have to wait a few minutes. There was 30 men in here this morning. They just come back from a mission, and that's how many they lost out of that barracks that day." There was six enlisted men on the crew, and there was 6 in there, and there'd been 6 crews in there that morning.
Now, were these the times that they were having daytime bombing over?
I never flew anything that wasn't broad daylight.
So,
And we'll get into that a little more. Now, where our bases was, is this, they call it East Anglo in England here, can you see? Yep. And this was all of our fighter and bomber bases in that angle, see? On this, I'll pass it around. You could take it over there. My base was Kim Bolton. The man on that picture with me, he was over here at a different base. The square symbols are the B-17 bases, and I those are the 24s in each fighter.
Rachel, question.
Was it your first flight out when you were shot down?
It's the 34th. He had flown 34 missions. Although I will say, you have an interesting story. You just got married before your...
Well, we'll get to that.
Go ahead, Bryce. Was the B-17 the only plane that you were in?
The only one?
Yeah.
It was the only bomber that I ever flew in. This is by far the best one. I was lucky. I was trained in the B-24 and never did want to fly in it, and I never did, so. The B-17, as you can notice, is built like an airplane that would fly when it was so shot up there was nothing left to it. It was 103 feet from one wing tip to the other. That back stabilizer was 18 feet to the top of it when the plane sat on the ground. it gives you a little idea just how big it was. It was one of the best planes we had in them days, and one of the biggest. Here's a man back there with the
Sarah,
What's the difference between a B-17 and a B-24?
what's the difference between a B-17 and a B-24?
Oh, the engines was different. The B-24 was a boxcar with wings on, built by Ford Motor Company. The B-17 was built by Bollings. The design of it is the same thing that all our airliners got to be, the shape and so on, and it was built more like an airplane. The B-24 would haul just a few more bombs than us. It was an awful hard ship to get out of when it was shot up. Now you notice this plane is silver. They came to us in England with paint on them. We took it all off, just put a little paint where the sun wouldn't blind the pilot. By having the paint off of that airplane, we could fly another 5,000 feet higher and carry more bombs and fly faster.
The weight of the paint.
The weight of the paint on that plane. It wasn't so much the weight of the paint as it was it stopped the airflow.
Resistance.
Resistance as well, see? And incidentally, kids, an airplane don't fly in the air because the wings hold it up. The way the wing is shaped, the top of the wing is curved over, and where it comes down, that makes a vacuum. 60% of the lift in the wing is from the top side, lifting the plane into the air.
Dylan,
What rank were you in Air Force?
I want to know what rank you were.
Gordon?
What rank were you?
I was tech sergeant. General Arnold, who was in charge of the Air Force, we didn't have an Air Force then, it was part of the Army, had made it a point that all men that flew combat would have a rating, so we'd be used better when we was prisoners of war. Now, I told you about the barracks with only the 6 men in it. All the time I flew my 34-minute missions, only one out of 3 men got back. I mean, if 800 men went out, why, there'd only be 1 out of 3 in that first mission to get back. It was that tough. Mission, we got up in the morning, usually anywhere from 2 o'clock in the morning until 4, and went to briefing. They told us where we was going and what to expect. We took off then, and we'd be in the air anywhere from 6 to 10 hours before we was back. These boys ought to ask questions.
Chad,
Did you have any relatives in the war?
did you have any relatives that went into the war also?
My mother had it pretty rough. She had 3 sons and 2 grandsons in the combat at the same time. Just think of what it was to the mothers had it worse than we did. We knew we was lying, they didn't.
Go ahead.
How high could the B-17 go?
How high was the B-17? How high did it fly?
We flew most all our missions at about 32,000 feet. You divide that into miles, and that's over 5 miles up in the air.
Chad, or excuse me, Cody,
How many bombs could a B-17 hold?
how many bombs did you hold in the B-17?
It depends on what kind of bombs it was hauling. If there's incendiary, we'd have 100. If there's 500 pounds, we had 12.
You remember what an incendiary bomb is? What is that, Ted?
It's sort of a fire bomb where it starts like
Yeah, it creates a big fire.
Yeah.
blows up before it hits the
Uh,
ground.
It makes a fire that will burn down a brick building. It's an acid fire. And when we bombed Hamburg, Germany, the first time, we had fires burning at 1,800 degrees Fahrenheit, and you cook your meat at 300. It's pretty hard for a such city to take. Our cities here with so much wood in them would be in bad trouble.
Go ahead, Lindsay.
Did any of the sons or grandsons die in the war?
Did any of your relatives end up dying in the war? Your brothers and
You mean in the bombing?
in not necessarily bombing, but just in combat? Did your
Yeah. While I'm talking here, I'll see if I can come across the one picture I have here. I tell you, I think you should let me go just a little bit ahead here and then come with questions. I'll come across that picture. My brother Jim lives in the Almonds. He was in the schools for 30-some years and retired. He went in at 17. At the time I was shot down, he got back from the Pacific. They had a ship load out from under him and was down with fever. He went back, finished World War II, and ended up in the Korean War and was at the Chosin Reservoir, where the whole regiment was completely wiped out with 30 men. So whoever was in at that time, if they went overseas, seen combat and whatever they was in, he was in the Navy. Well, anyway, I'll get back to where I was. My first mission was on October 14th, 1943. I got to England a short time before that. Our mission that day was to Schweinfurt, Germany. We lost 60 airplanes, 30 on the way in and 30 over the target and on the way out. That meant 600 men went down that day. And they figured that only 40% of them men got to the ground. The rest was killed in the air on the way down. Our first mission to Berlin, which come in March, we lost 800 men. And the sad part of it was, the men that flew was the best physically fit and supposedly the most brilliant and so on of the American soldiers, because you had to have it to get in the Air Force. It was quite an experience in your first 2.5 hours of combat to see that many planes be blown out of the air. You might look like your age the day before, but from that night on, you looked at least 10 years older, I'll guarantee that. You see, most of our flyers was younger than I was, and I was 21 when I went in. They got to looking like old men awful fast. We flew these missions against fighters, the best in the world, with no escort. We had the guns on the planes to protect us. And we did shoot down a lot of fighters, but you can't get them all. And it ended up that before I was shot down, we'd got the P-51 Mustang, which was a wonderful fighter. So things weren't quite so bad, but still, we thought they had them on their knees, but still we lost many planes every time we went out. But anyway, I carried on through my missions, and I do have a copy here someplace. My first 4 missions aren't on here. Otherwise, it gives the date, the town in Germany that we went to bomb, and why we went. The first one here was synthetic rubber plant we went after. I'll start this around, and there's some more of them here.
Some of us in the back.
And incidentally, if anybody here wants to copy anything I got, that's all right with me. Now, if you notice on that sheet of missions, the last mission says Stettin, Germany, or Posen, Poland. Stettin, Germany was considered German at that time, and right now it's considered to be back in Poland. Now,
Some water for you if you
oh, not right now, thank you. I may want it, but, you want to come around the corner there?
You bet.
Get that there. You see, we was stationed in England in that bulge. Now, most all of my missions was into Germany in the Ruhr Valley. That's the industrial part that's right under you there. Yeah, and the day I was shot down, now where's Berlin? Yeah, and Stettin's just north of there, on that bay. No, a little farther this way, yeah.
Oh, thanks.
We got that far and was hit. Posen, Poland was still over in here someplace. Straight, just about straight in from, it might not show it on that map.
Oh, here's Posen.
Yeah. And that's where we were supposed to go that day. Now I'm down on the 34th mission. They said they wouldn't let me fly anymore if I got back, but I didn't get back, so I guess they had nothing to worry about. But anyway, we was hit over Stettin. I could tell you more about the combat part, and we can drop back to it, but we'll go on farther. It seems there are more interested in the prisoner of war part. And from Stettin, we was shot up. 2 other B-17s was shot up there too, and the crews sailed off. We stayed with ours. And you see that island in the center of Denmark there, the bigger one? That's where Odense is. That's where we crash landed the plane.
So you turned back and headed.
We had a choice. We could try the North Sea with only one engine running or crash land there. And if you look at that, you'll see how close to Sweden we were just before we went down. And that was neutral. But we'd always said we'd never go to Sweden because there was too many running there to get out of combat. We had a little boat in the crew and decided that we'd set down in Denmark because because this is in the 13th of May. If you went down in the North Sea, you couldn't stay alive for more than 15 minutes in the water. It was that cold. And as you point the North Sea out between England and Europe there. Well, then the interesting part there was that we had no field to land on. We landed in about a 5-acre field. We'd have put the wheels down, we'd have run into something and probably killed us all. So we only put them halfway down and let it go in on the belly. Now, I'm getting into where I'm becoming a prisoner of war. If somebody else has got questions on the flying, maybe we should have them now on the combat part.
Eric,
How many men were in your crew when you got shot down?
said how many men were on your crew? Didn't you have time?
Well, there was 10 men on the plane.
Levi,
How fast did the B-17s go?
how fast did the B-17s fly?
With a full load, we averaged about 280 miles an hour. It would go a little faster.
Shane,
On all your 34 missions, how many did you complete?
out of all 34 missions, did you complete them all, or
Well, the
were there-
34 missions, I wouldn't have had, only I completed them all with the last one. We never turned back. The 8th Air Force never retreated once. If there was one plane left in the air, it kept going until we got to the target.
Logan?
How many people survived other than you through the crew that was on the plane?
Did your whole crew survive that when they crash
Yes.
landed? So they were all taken to the prisoner of war camp.
Yeah. Now, there was, out of this crew, there's 4 commissioned officers and 6 enlisted men. We were separated when we was taken prisoners.
The officers treated a little bit better?
Yes, they probably did. They was entitled to it, I guess. They're supposed to be smarter. There wasn't one of them that considered themselves any better.
Michael?
Why did you want to fly plane 17 in combat?
Why did you prefer to be in the Air Force rather than in the Army?
I was a farm kid. I was a good mechanic. And when you're in the Air Force, if you get back to your base, you got it nice until you go again the next day. Incidentally, on those missions that sheets I passed out, if you look through even January, February, March, and April of 44, I went every day, just about every day. I was showing the dates on those missions.
Is that a hard feeling, knowing that basically you were going on suicide mission when it comes down to it? You were going daylight, and they could see you. Was that a hard feeling, knowing that each day that you might have to come back?
Yeah, the only thing was I'd been raised in a family. I'd keep telling them my mother prepared me for death the day I was born. I was never afraid. I fought as hard as anybody to stay alive, but I was never afraid of what would happen if I was going to die. I was well prepared.
Seth?
Before you said if you came back, you couldn't fly any more missions. Why?
He was wondering why at that 34 mark you wouldn't have to fly anymore.
I wasn't supposed to have to fly any after 25. I kept going then, and I kept going on after 30. They asked me to go 30, mainly because I knew my enemy, I knew the country, and I didn't want to fly over water. The ones that quit and come home in 3 months, they was over the Pacific, and most of them didn't make it.
See, it was a reward for those that completed 25 missions, they didn't have to go back over Germany and bomb again. And then, so they upped it to 30, and then he could another reward, and now to 34. So it was a reward for him not to go back out. Joel.
Did every man that was on the plane survive the
Did everyone that was on your crew survive the prison camps?
I wouldn't really be able to answer that. We left the camp in February and was on the march for 83 days in the dead of winter. There was 8,000 men in the prison camp. 6,000 left on the march, and only 5,500 got to the other end. I wouldn't know if one of them died or not.
Go ahead.
How long could the B-17s stay in the air?
How long can they stay in the air? I know that you said you were on a mission for approximately 6 to 8 hours at some times.
Well, we could carry gas enough to keep the plane in the air for 10 hours. Any longer, we had to do something to save gas. So that kind of answers that one.
Marie.
What did you have to do for your first mission?
First mission was he was bombing that synthetic rubber plant. Okay. Why would you not want to have a rubber plant continue on? Why would you not, Jared? Yeah, they make the wheels for the vehicles that they're using. Which are going to help them transport their equipment and things going from one place to another.
Incidentally, kids, let me answer that this way. The first mission, when we lost so many planes, at Schweinfurt, was a ball bearing plant. You can't run any vehicle that turns on wheels without bearings. So if you destroy the bearings before they get them in the vehicle and they don't have any, they can't build one. So everything we did, you'll see the oil refineries, take the gas away from them, and so on. Now,
Let's say some of these questions go on to the continuation of your story.
you had a question along. Oh, here's one of my brother.
Real quick, Brad.
How old were you that
22.
Here's a photograph of the instrument panel on one of them, and that shows just the instruments in this group for one engine, and there was 4.
Should we continue on with the story then?
Or-
Should we continue on with the story? Find out what happened to you after you crash landed there?
Yeah, we sure will. You asked me about, I was married during the time. I was married on the 29th of April. On the 1st of May, I was back in a plane. There's a shipping orders under your thumb. Going on a mission. On the 13th, I was shot down. So that kind of answers that part. I didn't see anybody for a year after that. Now, we were now just correct me here if I'm missing something. When we left Denmark, is where we'd carry on, I guess. When we left Denmark, I should fill in what happens when the plane hits the ground. It's very interesting. When the plane stopped sliding, there was a big pile of dirt, and there was a German soldier standing on it with a big gun. The Germans had Denmark occupied during that time. The building below was full of troops. He yelled and they all come running out. We stood there for a while, and finally after they yelled at each other quite a while, they decided maybe we had pistols, and they made us put our hands in the air. Then they took us into a Quonset building, made us take all our clothes off, and stood there for hours with our hands in the air. This is late in the evening. Now, I found out in the last few years, I didn't tumble at the time. The big reason they made us strip, the Germans was going to do the Americans a favor and get rid of all our Jewish people. And they were looking for the Jewish men within the light group. And there was a way to know, so that's why they had our clothes on. We was put, now incidentally, how much time will we have?
As long as you want here, we get.
Well, I like that very, very much. Sometimes you gotta leave for another class. And they put us in a railroad coach. Over there, the coaches had little compartments that would hold 6 or 8 people. They put the 6 of us in this compartment with 3 guards. We traveled from Odense, bring your stick, which is at Center Island. They took us through here, Hamburg or Hanover. Incidentally, we had been bombing these towns. There was 30,000 laying dead in the street from our bombs in these towns. They was big industrial towns. From there, we went to Frankfurt, down on the Main. And that's where we was interrogated. The reason I say down on the Main, there is another Frankfurt west, east of Berlin, see? Incidentally, at the time I was shot down, I could sit down with a piece of paper and draw a map and put every town in Germany on it. You know, but it seemed from the air. When we got there, we were pulling into the station. I looked out the train window and I could see American boots that far off the platform hanging there. So what did that mean? That meant the civilians had took the crew just ahead of us away from the guards and hung them. They were quite dead. In the training I'd had with my folks, my father always said the Lord helps them that helps themselves. Don't wait for somebody to do it. Get up and do it for yourself. They, 3 guards, I happened to outrank them. The regular German army had lots of respect for rank. I jumped up and ordered them in English to get up and protect us, and the 3 of them did. I'd have been hanging there with the rest of them. That was up the platform in Frankfurt, Germany. We were put in cement block buildings in the weedy area off from the college, and solitary confinement that night because they wanted to interrogate us. Our orders was that you tell nothing but rank, name, and serial number. They wanted all the information they could get. When my turn come the next day, there was a German major, I'd say maybe 40 years old. He looked at me and he said, "There's no use in asking you, so I'll tell you. He said, your dad was born in Armstrong County, Pennsylvania in 1882. Your mother was born in Otterdale County, Minnesota in 1885. He told me when all my brothers and sisters was born. He even in the meantime said, oh, you might be interested. Your major of your CO was promoted to major this morning. That's the kind of information they had. They would come from over the radio, Access Sally, even tell us that we should set our clock ahead in the mess hall. It was 10 minutes slow, and it was. And I will also tell you what happened. That's propaganda, kids. But this man that interrogated me, he could tell me more than I knew. I think he's going on. Now, I mentioned Access Sally, and I have a picture of her here. We'll get to a little later on. I might say, when a while ago I made the statement it was harder on our mothers than it was on us, actually. When we seen daylight in the morning, we knew we was alive. She didn't. I was shot down on the 13th of May. She didn't know if I was dead or alive until July. A lady in the state of Pennsylvania in this ham operating deal had picked up a German broadcast stating that I had been taken prisoner and was in the prison camp in July. Now, she didn't hear from the government until after that. Now, I have a copy of the little letter she sent my mother. That's someplace. That corner up there. Why don't you just read it to them?
A message addressed to you was read this evening, that one? Or over here?
That.
The plane of Tech Sergeant Warren David Claypool, number 37315-875, was shot down. He is now a prisoner of war in a German camp, no other data given. I trust this information will be of help to you. From Mrs. C.P. Skilton.
Yeah, and that's what the ham operators did in them days. And I suppose it was a good 2 months before the government finally let her know I was alive. When I found this VFW magazine with that in, I took it for that reason. Then I looked at the back here, and here's a picture of Access Sally after she was taken prisoner. Now, she was an American girl from the state of Maine. She got out of Germany when the war ended and back to Maine, and they come and got her and took her back to the Nuremberg trials where they tried the war criminals. I'll pass it around. She was tried and convicted of treason. Her penalty, she was shot by a firing squad. Mainly because she was an American that was helping the enemy, see. When you think about this man Walker that come out of Afghanistan, and they want to be so good to him, we wouldn't have this trouble if we weren't quite as chicken-hearted as some people are. So that's what happened to Access Sally. Now, Japan had Tokyo Rose. She was American-born, but she was Japanese, which did the same thing. In fact, when we got to England, some of the first thing you would hear would be nice American music on the radio being played by her in Germany. But she's also into nice music with the words, your girlfriends and your wives are out playing around tonight, and you'd better hurry up and get your war over and go home. So that broke down morale was something awful. So that kind of covers that. And anyway, from Frankfurt, we were put in a cattle car, and in Europe the car is about the size of 1/4 the size of a car here. Maybe you've heard the word used 40 and 8. Well, 40 and 8 meant this boxcar, cattle car. In World War I, our troops named it that. It would haul 40 men or 8 mules. There was 100 shoved in that, and it was sent up to where the prison camp was. It was up, yeah, you're getting right close.
Right in there.
Yeah. It was up in Poland, the prison camp. We bypassed Berlin. On the way up there, it took us about 3 days to get up with the doors nailed shut and no food and water. But we was kind of used to it for them. I might add one thing, that the prison camp wasn't as hard on me. I had dropped 34 loads of bomb on the enemy. Some of the poor men was shot down on their first mission. It seems so useless. One friend of mine over in Wisconsin was shot down in his first mission, and he drifted around on the North Sea for a week before he was captured by the Germans. He really don't know why he even went over there, you know. Now, the reason they took us up there, when you got to that area, it was about 3,500 miles from anything but Russia. It was getting us away, as far away from the England area as possible, the prison camps. They couldn't work the men with ratings. The ones that they couldn't work was actually better off. They had something to do and a little better food. But that's one reason they had it way out. It was a jack pine forest like our jack pine forest around here. It was only just a short ways off the Baltic. And someplace I have a map. Incidentally now, to pass this around, when we rode home, this I wrote before, a day or two before I shot down. The Army mimeographed these letters so they could send many more in one bunch. See what I mean? If you send a full-size letter, you wouldn't send very many where you could send hundreds of them. See? When we got to the prison camp at Stalag Loop 4, does anybody here know anybody that was in a prisoner of war in World War II?
Right. His uncle was a prisoner of war.
Yeah. What was he in?
Huh?
Yeah.
He was in the Marine. He was in Vietnam.
Oh, in Vietnam, yeah. Well, then I couldn't tell you much about that other than what you know already. But in World War II, here is a list of all the men that was in my prison camp. These names come out on a piece of scrap paper, and the man put the book together after he was home. Now, anybody here German? You must be.
I wouldn't be able to read that.
No.
All I can read is Deutschland at the bottom.
Yeah.
Kriegsgefangen Lagerberg.
Lager.
Lager.
That's Kriege was a prisoner. Lager was a prison camp. What's the next there?
They're Luftwaffe.
Yeah, Luftwaffe meant Air Force. nothing but airports there,
So it's
near Fury. Number 4.
number 4.
There's some very interesting things in that book. I'd like to show you later on.
Okay.
In fact, one thing in there that is very interesting is this lady here.
Yes, Jess.
Did you ever try to contact your mom when you were in the camp?
Did you try to contact your parents or your wife or anybody when you were in the camp?
When I was a prisoner. We were supposed to have the privilege of writing 1 or 2 letters a month. I did, and they wrote to me, but I got them all a year and a half after I was back home. They didn't much care if we got letters or not. Germany was in terrible trouble during that time anyway, as far as transportation and actually they was having as bad a time to stay alive as we were as prisoners.
What, so you're brought to the camp then, divided up into barracks?
Yeah, I do have some pictures of, well, first, let's pass this around. And this has a little something to do with the day I was shot down. When a plane was shot down out of your group, you tried to watch it, mainly to see if any parachutes come out. If you reported back, you see the parachute, it should mean a man got out of the plane. And here at the bottom of this was my aircraft, and this is the list of the crew. This is a list of after they found out we was prisoners of war. And it says at the bottom here, aircraft 972. This aircraft was seen to drop its bombs early in order to stay with the formation. Number 1 engine was feathered and on fire. Feathered means if your engine goes dead, you turn the propeller so the wind don't make it spin. Because in a short time it burns the engine on fire. Number 1 engine is feathered and on fire. Aircraft later dropped out of formation and went down under control. No parachutes. So that meant perhaps nobody got out of it. Okay. Would you like some of this stuff in your hand? You can sure come and get any of it anytime you want. So that is all that was ever reported back to my folks. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. Here's a picture of my wedding you spoke about on the 29th of April, and by the 13th of May I was a prisoner. Here's a picture of my crew that I flew most of my missions with. This book here is put together of the 379th Bomb Group, which I was a member of, by an English lady. Now these books are ready to fall apart, but take them and look at them. If something comes loose, just don't lose it. There's no use having a book if people can't look at it, is there, kids? That book is on B-17s. Now, we might let me rest my voice a minute. Let's hang on to that for 1 minute. And you wondered about what mission was like. If you look in here, on this page is something by Ernie Powell, the newspaper man. There's quite a few loose pages in this book, but this preface little story. I don't think anybody threw over 5 or 6 missions that didn't come home once, like this plane was. If somebody'd read it over to this mark, it's happened to many planes.
Described a mission then. The pretty German girl pedaled her bicycle to the side of the street. She heard the roar of a speeding truck approaching from behind her. It was probably a military vehicle, and the wiser course was to get well out of its way. Safely at the curb, she stopped, turned to watch and froze in horror. Just a few feet above the street, she saw not a truck, but an enormous 4-engined aircraft bearing down on her. Black, deadly snouts of machine guns projected from various positions in the plane's massive body. Its upper part a mottled brown, and its underside an indeterminate light blue. Near one wingtip she could see a white 5-pointed star, the insignia of the American Air Forces. As fascinated as she was frightened, the Fraulein recognized it as an American bomber. The enemy plane overtook her in seconds, and as it passed by, she saw the men in the side gun positions waving at her. Although the 2 gun barrels and the round turret underneath the belly of the plane pointed directly at her, there was no gunfire as the plane thundered over. And though she could not hear them, other members of the crew whistled at her. She watched, shaken, and at the same time curious, as the big plane reached the square where the 2 churches stood, their twin spires jutting above the flight path of the bomber. With its engines trailing a black wisp of smoke, the wounded craft merely banked gracefully, one wing almost scraping the cobbled street, and flew between the 2 steeples. As suddenly as it had appeared from one distance, the great aircraft hurtled into another, leaving behind a perplexed, shocked girl bicyclist. Little Willie was taking the Autobahn route home to England.
Now, Autobahn is a highway in Germany.
Little Willie was a Boeing B-17 Flying Fortress, piloted by Bernard M. Dopko of Old Forge, Pennsylvania. Their destination? Station 136, Nettishall Airdrome, England. Home base of the 388 Bombardment Group, H. Struck by flak over Berlin with the supercharger on one engine out of commission and a runaway propeller on another, Little Willie plunged out of the group formation. German fighters swept in for the kill as tail gunner Robert M. Hayden, Jr. drove them off. Dopko pointed the plane toward the earth to shake off the fighters, when Bombardier William Kelly shouted, "Look out, Dop! You're going to run into the curb!" Dopko leveled out, and they were now 50 feet above the ground on the outskirts of Berlin. As far as the group was concerned, Little Willie was officially missing in action. The runaway engine was threatening to wrench off the wing. The other engine was useless. The tail was badly damaged, and the radio was out completely. Feathering the windmilling propeller, Dopko was able to remain airborne, but barely, and pointed toward England. With only 2 engines, it was impossible to gain altitude, but that was protection from fighter attack. Across Germany and Holland, the B-17 never exceeded 100 feet in altitude. Over the English Channel, they were down to 10. At this level, one of the dead engines came back to life, and Little Willie climbed to 5,000 feet and easily made Nettishall. The Flying Fortress had brought its crew home again.
Now, it named the base he's going to. You could find it on that, but we won't know on that towel there. It's out. I thought you'd kind of enjoy that, because I don't think anybody ever made very many missions that didn't come home crippled like that. Now, I guess I'm almost at the prison camp, right? We went by that boxcar. There was a stop on the railroad out in this forest, and we was unloaded, and it had about 2 miles from where it stopped out to where the camp was. I was there ahead of when the camp was completed. A few of us that was with that group. So I was one of the first ones in the camp. There was 3 barracks at that time, and they was building a new camp. I was in them for some time. I guess about 3 weeks. I was looking for a certain one there. I had it a second ago. You gotta get a better way.
Why don't you look? I'm going to have everybody stand up, take a stretch break real quick here, okay? Stretch yourself.
Prisoner of War medal. I've got the medal here to show you. And they put it in the necktie. He's got it 45 years after I earned it. We can get them out of these books, see. Now, we're still just got to the prison camp, and we got off, and we're marching out to it. Here's a picture. It's blurred when it was copied. I was in this barracks then for 3 or 4 weeks. The only food we got was dehydrated cabbage, and if you burn a newspaper, that's what you got. That's dehydrated cabbage. This 4th window from the back end of this barracks. If you want to take it and pass it. It was the room I was in at the time. Another one of the young men that was in the room with me walked up to the window from the outside. Here's when I got that Prisoner of War medal being awarded to me. And the German guard shot him through the left shoulder, went clear through his body and up into the roof of the barracks. And he's on that wagon behind that horse. They was hauling him out just a few minutes after they shot him. And that is a kind of a picture of the funeral. Now I do have books on our march that was wrote by this man. We'll get to that a little later. I didn't mention this. I usually show it. This is really the theme of why I'm out of here. Freedom is not free. If we're going to have freedom, we must fight for it. We must be ready to go when we're asked. And kids, in the 5th grade, you know, you're awful close to the age that it isn't long until it's your turn to go. So do what you can between now and then to make it a better world. It isn't an easy thing to do. Now I'm going to pass out the medals here, and then we'll go on through the other, so you can all have a chance to look at them. These are kind of sad looking. I have 7 kids, and these set for all them years where every one of them could pick them up and play with them. So they got more a little bit. Now here is the air medal, the Prisoner of War medal. This goes on your lapel, and that's the medal itself. Just pass them around, kids, don't lose any. This is the air medal. He was awarded the air medal for 10 bombing missions. This is what you wore on your lapel. For every 10 more you made, you got an oak leaf cluster to put on this lapel pin. was the theater of operation ribbon. But this on, anybody that knew it would know you was in the European theater of operation. Pacific had a different one. And here's the medal they mentioned in that article. If you weren't in the stockade when you was discharged, you got a good conduct medal. And of course it was the 8th Air Force I was in. This is one of their pins. Now they'll be happy for a while. Anyway, we got to that camp and all we got to eat for many days was a dehydrated cabbage because they had no food out there yet. It gave us dysentery terrible, but I guess we lived through it. Here's another one of them pictures, hauling that man out. Now, as you understand, this camp was up in Poland. We finally moved from the old barracks into the new camp. It had the barracks up on 4-foot posts, so you could almost walk under them without bending much. So we discouraged digging out.
So no tunnels, you mean?
Huh?
No tunnels to get out.
Well, no, we sure made them think we was, but biggest trouble with that, we had it called out in the middle of the night to count us if they thought we were. And the Germans were poor counters. They couldn't agree with each other was the biggest trouble. There's nothing dumb about a German. They're as smart as they come. Well, I think at the prison camp we got a lot of them that was the smartest people anyway. You know, regarding prisoners. But anyway, the prison camp, if somebody had said I'm going to shoot you in the morning, I think I could have laid down and went to sleep. But the anxiety of the thought, are they going to shoot you in the morning? That was the hardest part to take. You never knew what to expect. And of course there was many of them that wanted us shot. Incidentally, if Hitler had won that war, every child 55 years and younger would have had a German father. That was his plans. He had his chosen men to be the father of all babies so he'd get his superior race. That was his dream. Now this is Hitler's dream. It wasn't the people's necessarily. But you see, Hitler trained the German Nazi youths to even squeal on their parents, and their parents was put to death at times for not doing what Hitler wanted. That was real sad. And of course, Germany is one of the most industrial countries then and now that there ever was. But anyway, we existed through the prison camp. And I'm going to pass these around. One of these rocks, after the camp was deserted, not far from the prison camp was a school in the woods for a farm school for Polish youth. They put that rock out in front of the camp. The camp's completely gone, only these markers. And they've maintained it for 57 years now. those kids in Poland. We got money enough together to send the school computers because they didn't have any. There was they couldn't do a thing for us when we was there. We'll pass these around. We went over sometime later. I didn't go, but my POW group, and put up the other 2 markers. You want to pass that way? My original issue of wings, I didn't pass them around yet, was these. I wouldn't have them, only I sent them home to my mother, and she had them for me. Now that wings tells what you do in the Air Force. That was crew member wings. The pilot's wings was different, and the bombardier's wings had a bomb on it, and so on. They was all the same, only what was on them. You can pass that around and let them look at it. That's what they're for, is to look at. Anyway, within the prison camp, if we'd have got the Red Cross parcel once a week like we was supposed to, we'd have been quite well off, but we didn't. We was lucky if we got a half of one a week.
What would be in a Red Cross parcel? What would be inside the Red Cross parcel?
Well, I do have a book here that shows, but there was usually a can of Spam, a few different kinds of meat. They weren't all in the same parcel. I should look in the book, I just don't remember too well. There was a few dried prunes, a couple packs of cigarettes. Of course, that was good money. If we could get a guard today, they liked their cigarettes. We could get extra food out of them if they could get their hands on it. Even in England, our American cigarettes is better than money.
So you do a lot of swapping, a lot of trading with the cigarettes for something else.
Yeah, but the only thing is the German guard would have been shot if he got caught doing it by his own people, see. So that was pretty good. Well, within the prison camp, American is awful wasteful. I'm sure you all know that. I'd spend time out in the yard picking up prune pits after somebody had spit them out, and I'd crack them, and I'd trade the inside of them prune pits to somebody for something they had I wanted later on. I never smoked a cigarette, but I'd find cigarette butts like that in the yard. I'd pick them up and take the tobacco out of them, and I'd get all their bread as long as for that tobacco when they was out of cigarettes. There's ways to get by. I did cut a lot of hair. They gave us kindergarten scissors to use, and we could cut hair with them after we got them good and sharp. But the anxiety in the prison camp was the worst. There was a high fence that come in at the top, and 40 feet inside of that fence was a post with an inch-by-inch railing on it. Anytime you put your finger on that railing, the machine gun started shooting. And they were pretty good shots. That's how close you could get to the main fence. If you got more than 3 in a group outside, the Germans got very nervous. And time within the prison camp mainly was to find something to do. We was confined to a room that was supposed to have 6, 8 at the most men in it, and we had 14 in each room. This camp was that crowded. I happened to be one of the older ones, and I was more or less chosen to be the room leader, and I had to deal with the Germans. It didn't bother me any. I could yell as loud as they could. where to play them. I tell you, with the German army, not necessarily the Gestapo and those, they are very military. And it didn't care if you was their prisoner. If you acted like a soldier, you got used like one. If you didn't, they hated you if you come whining and wanted favors. That didn't go good with them. They was too good military men, and they were. So, the camp carried on. That man was shot at the very beginning. Finally, on the 5th of February, was notified that in the morning we're leaving camp. We're evacuating the camp. Here we sat with 8,000 men. They started hauling the ones that couldn't walk out with whatever they could. 6,000 of us started out, half of them on the morning of the 6th of February. There was a foot of snow on the ground. It was 20 below that morning. We marched for the next 83 days through Germany. Traveled 630 miles. There was a doctor who was a prisoner with us. He said at the time that even in the prison camp, we never got more than 700 calories a day. The Army figures on you having 13 or 1,500. So that's kind of a low ration. When I was shot down in May, I weighed 185 pounds. When this day come along, I was just a little over 100. This was a day of liberation. We'll get to that in a few minutes. We was taken from the camp and kept on the move. Hitler had a stronghold down there towards Munich, and they wanted to get all the prisoners down there. He had to give orders for shooting them, but the guards wouldn't. To hold us because they knew the United States would use them better when the time comes. But they couldn't get us through. We more or less marched in circles. We started from the prison camp here, way up here. Our march would have took us. Now the reason we left the prison camp, the Russians was coming in. We could hear the Russians' guns, and they didn't want the Russians liberating us. And it went down by Stettin. That's north of Berlin. And about half of the group, a few of them got into the officers' prison camp here at Barth. I think it's right in there someplace. You may not have the name there. The majority of that first group went on east, or west, I should say, over into Germany here, and they were liberated by the British Army. The group I was with was about the same route to the center of Germany there. And then we made a lot of circles. They couldn't get through any place. And we went south, a little farther south than that. And we was liberated near Bittersfield. Now, here's how small the world really is. Here's a picture of the group I was with crossing the plank bridge. We'd bombed out the rail bridge at Bittersfield. The 104th was on the other side of the river, infantry, American 104th. That was the Timberwolf Division. We were sensible enough, so we didn't try to too many cross that bridge. That wasn't much of a bridge. But there's how we looked after 83 days and 600 miles. You see, we had no buildings or anything to get in. And ago, some of my family was up at, what is that, Little Fort over hunting deer, and the night they was in the tavern with a group of hunters, and somebody had told them that I'd been a prisoner of war and was liberated there. He says, I'm going home, I'll be back in a few minutes. He went home and he got that picture and brought back. That's only a few years ago. That's something. He said, I found the camera that day, a German camera, and I took a picture, and this was one of them. You guys crossing that.
It's amazing.
Yeah, isn't it amazing? Then now here's a little story on that march. This is what it was called. Here's something I like to point out that people look at. This lady here is in the nursing home now. She's 93. She's one of the angels of Bataan. When Bataan fell, the nurses had thousands of wounded men to take care of, and they become prisoners of war for over 3 years. Here's a picture of her when she was at the time, and that's a picture of her today. I'll just pass it around. It's very interesting. I'll give it to you first. You can take it. And you can imagine what it would be like to be a female of a prisoner of thousands of males. I mean, it wouldn't be a very nice position to be in. Anyway, we get back to mine. Now, we got to cross that bridge. I will say this, I was a farm boy and from the far north. When we crossed that bridge, we went up to a building. The Army said you can crawl in there, but look out for booby traps. I picked up this German passbook, so I'd have something to write in. And this cigarette package got the list of the names of the men that was in the room with me. They are, don't lose it. And after I got out there, I sat down and tried to remember all the German villages we'd marched through and tried to put them in this book. But that was a genuine German passbook that every German had to have, I suppose. It's only got one entry in it.
Should we take some questions about the prisoner of war camp?
Yeah, anytime.
Sure. Ray.
Were you in the prisoner of war camp while the atomic bomb was dropped? When the atomic bomb was dropped?
No, he would have been released by then. She wanted to know if you were in the camp when the atomic bomb was dropped in Japan.
Well, you see, now that's a different war. Well, no, I shouldn't say it that way. That's a different world to me. I was in Europe. I was home by that time that it was dropped. I would like to add one more thing to that. How many people seen the Winter Olympics a year ago, or 2 years ago in Japan? You seen all them terrible mountains and so on. When you look at that, if we hadn't have dropped the atomic bomb, we'd have had to went in there and lost thousands and thousands of American lives to get the Japs out of it. The atomic bomb took care of it. A lot of people think we shouldn't have dropped it. I think that gives you a pretty good answer. I think one American life was worth every one of them that the Japs lost. They had a chance to surrender. Now, go ahead.
Rachel.
What city was your prison camp?
She wanted to know what city the prison camp was in. I couldn't pronounce that name.
Yeah, it's
Right up around in here.
yeah. Is that name under the camp?
That just says Königsberg. That would,
Oh.
that wouldn't have been into
I
it.
don't think it's on there. I should be able to tell you, but I have trouble pronouncing it. And it really don't matter. It was right out in the woods.
Crystal,
It was at Poland, that so-called town where it was.
There's 16 after the
there's 16 points on the star on that medal. Does that have to do with anything, with any symbolism there?
Which medal?
Uh,
Could I see the ribbon part? Oh, that's a air medal. Why there's 16 points, I don't know. It's probably a good question. I'll see if I can't find out.
Any other questions? Shane,
What was the prisoner of war called?
excuse me?
What was the camp called?
Well, I read it to you off this yellow thing here. Remember? It was a thing that I mumbled through a little while back. Kriegsgefangenen Lager, excuse me. Okay? Yes, Jess.
Did you ever regret being in the Navy or being in the
Air Force?
Air Force because of what happened to you?
Did you regret being in the Air Force because of what happened to you?
Did it what?
Did you ever regret being in the military because of what happened to you?
No, I tell you, I can look any man in the eye and don't have a thing to hide. I went when my country asked me, and I did exactly what they asked me to do. And I tell you, that's an awful nice feeling. I'm going to pass this out. This is prisoners of war. You notice these ribs and the skin here? That's a breathing human being under that skin. This man here lives in New York Mills. He was in Europe. The most of them was Pacific.
He said it a little while back, but did you hear how much he weighed when he went into the camp and how much he weighed when he 185? And about 100 pounds when he came out. That's almost half his weight. So if you can imagine that. And I know many of you are over that 100-pound mark right now. Sarah. Describe your feelings when the war ended.
Pardon?
Describe your feelings when the war ended.
Well, I tell you, I was pretty happy. I went from the town where that bridge was, we got the lights and all that, down to a little town in France, and we was waiting to get moved someplace. General Eisenhower came in and one afternoon and said we're going to put 10 men where there's room for one on everything that floats and flies to get you out of here. But he says the ones that want to go back to England, there'll be planes in this afternoon to take you back to England. Well, I was married in England, so I wanted to go back to England. The wife and my son was there. And when I got back to England, my group was gone, so nobody even knew who I was. They wouldn't even claim me for an American. The Army wouldn't. But I got that all straightened out. But it's a mighty nice feeling when you think for that long a time that you're going to be killed. To know it's over, so you should be safe.
Shane.
Did you have any diseases during after the war?
First of all, in the prison camp, there are a lot of diseases and things that went around. You mentioned dysentery. And
Well, we got to drop back on that march just for a minute. The dysentery killed most of them men that didn't make the march. And if you read this, what the newspaper lady in Bemidji got in the paper, I have to give my mother credit for saving men there. Because I had been trained as a little kid. If you got the runs, as we called it, you go to the wood stove and you get a charcoal and you eat it. And and that'll take care of it. Runs. So I managed to get a hold of a loaf of bread. It was 2/3 sawdust, is what the Germans made. And I charred it until it was black, and I ate all I could and give the rest to my buddies. And that stopped my dysentery. The doctor that was a prisoner with us, who didn't have a pill of any kind to doctor with, seen me do it, so he had all the men doing it. So I give my mother credit for saving that thousands of men, just by the way I was brought up. But it works, kids. It's right in the medical books that it'll work.
And afterwards, I know that there's a lot brought up about post-traumatic syndrome and things like that. With,
Yeah. You have lots of it. One of the questions I got at the last one I was at, how did the war affect you? I tell you, it made one hard man out of me. I'm as gentle as they come, but don't cross me. That's about the best way to explain it. I incidentally have 7 kids, 26 grandchildren, and about 15 great-grandchildren. The one thing I regret in the whole deal was their first baby born after the prison camp made it to 2 years old, but he wasn't right when he was born, and it was mainly because of the malnutrition of myself and my wife both. In a case like that, there shouldn't have been another one for 2 years, see? But who thinks of that? That was one penalty I got from being a prisoner. But as far as, no, I got a muscle disorder almost 5 years ago, and went down. I couldn't turn over in bed, and I was put under home care, and the nurse took over my case then. She's the one that set up that meeting in the paper. She has been with me ever since, and that the one, and the first question she asked me, do you have flashbacks? I don't know as I ever had a flashback, and I think the reason why, I was old enough to realize what that kind of thing was. Those 17, 18-year old boys wasn't quite that lucky. They'd never been out in the world, and it was mighty hard on them. And I'm sure a lot of them had flashbacks. Now, one of the sad things, Germany wanted to do away with all Jews, so a man with a Jewish name was actually beat to death every day. They wouldn't quite kill him, but they'd beat him every day. And we had 1,800 German or Jewish pilots in my group, in the Mike prison camp. And they was all there under choice. They weren't drafted. But still, that was Germany's way. And of course, Germany, the time the war started, had to have a scapegoat, and they picked the Jews. It took 15 trillion German marks to buy a loaf of bread when Hitler took over. That explains why Hitler could take over. That the economy was that bad. Just think about it.
Yeah, it was easier to find someone that promised
Well,
things.
if you get into the history of the Depression years here, we was mighty close to taking something over right here. People were hungry in that 30s, first part of the 30s. Any more adults got questions here?
Any questions? Alyssa,
What was your wife's name?
what's your wife's name?
My wife's name was Brenda Maud Evans. Her father was Welsh. Her mother was English Irish. No, did I show you that wedding picture? It was
Yep,
here.
it's being passed around. Marie?
Did you have your number tattooed on your arm like everyone else?
We've been talking about some of the people in concentration camps, how they had numbers tattooed on their arms. Did you end up with
No,
a
I was never tattooed in any way. I don't even remember my prisoner of war number.
Ricky?
Is your wife still alive?
Is your wife still alive?
No, she's been dead several years. Incidentally, this young man with me here is my youngest son. He drove me up here today. I've got 5 sons. He's the youngest. I got a daughter younger than him, but she's quite a little younger.
Go ahead, Brittany. What? She asked where you got married. It was in England.
Yeah. Well, to get married at that time, you never knew when you could get to where the girl was you was going to marry. I came home from a mission at 6 o'clock at night from over Germany. Managed to catch a train up to her town. And when I got to her place, I was about 2 minutes late for my wedding. But you couldn't have it in the church because the church had to have bands read. So we went to the registrar's office, and that's right out in front of that kind of a little courthouse in the city she lived in.
Is that,
How long were you married?
how long were you married?
Well, the time she died, we would have been married 50 years.
Caitlin? Yeah, he mentioned that he had 5. Yeah. Josh,
What was your favorite warplane?
your favorite war plane? Would it be the B-17?
The B-17 had to be awful favorite, but the plane that kept me alive was that little P-51 Mustang fighter. And 18-year-old boys flying them. The one reason I enjoy it out here with these kids as much as I do, in the war, most of the pilots I had was younger than I was. I learned to respect young people, and they've got brains too, and they get better.
Chris? He said he was 21. Crystal?
What was the address on the piece of paper?
Oh, that would have been to his parents. Jalen?
How many medals did you get in all?
How many medals in all did you get?
Oh, I didn't get all that many. What I showed you mainly. There's a few more I should have had. Now the Purple Hearts you get when you're wounded in combat. I don't have a Purple Heart. Nobody hurt me. They didn't draw blood.
Go ahead, Mr. Rudd.
Do you get an opportunity to go to reunions where there are other men that were at the concentration camp or in your unit?
Have you gone to any reunions with other people that have been?
Yes. We have our ex-POW organization. We'll have our state convention in Fergus Falls in May. And this year our national convention's down in Rochester. You don't find a better group in the world than them people that you was in Watch Your Freedom with. Now, I went to Des Moines, Iowa to the national one, and there was 2,500 there. There was over 500 from our prison camp, and we had a reunion of itself by on the side of the 500. They set up a bar in the corner to pay the large bill and rent for the room. I think they sold one drink out of the 500. You know, if you have any sense at all, when you fight that hard to stay alive, they probably all had a bottle back in their hotel room. But they wasn't we've had a group for several years that's went back to where the prison camp was. I wouldn't have minded going back, but I'd never go with a group. I fought too hard to stay alive to get out of there. Care too much. I wouldn't. The one reason I'd like to go, it's in Poland, and the Polish people are mighty fine people.
Chad?
You know any of your relatives in World War I?
Did you have any relatives in World War I?
Well, yes. My dad wasn't. He was too young for one, and well, he was married at the time. I had uncles in World War I. And of course, many relatives in World War II. That's the eggs back in Highland. And I've got 5 sons. The 3 oldest ones has all been in, and my daughter's husband's been in. The youngest 2, that one is one of them. He regrets it today because I wouldn't let it go when his turn come. They didn't have to, and I figured there was enough of them to give him time. He does, you ask him. It bothers him because he did exactly what the rest of us does. No one older than him didn't go, and it bothers him awful. So, I'll say this, Minnesota and North Dakota is noted to be the most patriotic states when it comes to war of any of the states in the Union. They put the most men in.
Send the most volunteers.
Well, whether volunteers or not, they're ready to go.
Brooke? Your sons and daughters, they were in the service. I mean, sons were in the service, but did they end up going into combat then as well?
Well, they went where they was sent, but they was in the peacetime army, boy. The oldest boy spent 4 years in Germany. The next boy, he spent his time in Korea. And the 3rd boy spent his time in Korea. Now, at that time, they could have been sent to Vietnam, but they both was lucky enough to get Korea. And of course, that was peacetime in Korea at the time. We still have an army in Korea. And the idea of the whole thing is you go in and you serve, and if you do what your country asks you to do, you get an honorable discharge. So any man who has an honorable discharge did what the country asked him to do while he's in there. It doesn't matter who he is.
In the long months that you were in the prison camp, what kept your hope going, your morale going, the morale of the other people around you?
Well, there was many things. I was part of it. I'll have a lot of those young ones that will come to me today and said I'd have been dead if you hadn't been there. On that march, that's the saddest part of my career. If your own brother was with you and it went down, if you stopped to help him, you was dead too. All you could have did was step over him and keep going. And that's hard to take when your buddies need you and you that bad off. You got to be an animal after the 3rd getting out if you're going to exist.
Cody?
During when you were marching, across Germany, did you ever try to escape?
When you were marching, were there any escapes, or did you try to escape at all?
Well, there was only one place you was going to live. Some did, and they was sorry. Was to stay with the group. Where was he going to go? There was no food in the whole country anyway. It was all enemy. There was no friends, unless you got up in Denmark and so on. I will point out right here, these pictures, this here is the front part of my plane that I was crashed in. If you read what it says under, the Germans had come in and loaded it on a boxcar to take it down into Germany and melt it down. Now, here again, kids, when that man told me that interrogated me all about my family, they had to come to our courthouses to find this out. When they wanted to bomb our trade towers, they come in and got their pilots training and their bomb to do it with in this country. We've got to wake up and change that a little bit, or we'll always be in trouble. We don't have to be that nice to people.
Private information should be just that, private.
Yeah.
Marie,
Was your wife in the war? Did your wife help the war?
did your wife help out in the war effort?
Yeah, she was, why she died early, she was loading 50 caliber machine gun shells, and the powder had ruined her lungs. She had emphysema that killed her. At the time it was in England, there couldn't be a light or a window open in the factory because of the German bombs. So they lived in it, breathed it. She was only 18 at that time.
Jalen,
How many different countries have you been to?
how many different countries have you been to?
Well, I use this expression. By the time I got back from the war, I'd been in 40 of the 48 states and all of Europe. I wasn't down on the ground, but I was over it. And I can tell you from 30,000 feet up what's down there. I flew over Badette in a plane that high.
And there's not much down there?
Pardon?
And there's not much down there?
Well, there's quite a little. You can sure tell the difference between the United States and this area over east here and Canada. They got roads all the way through theirs, you know.
Shane,
Well, in the prisoner of war camp, was there any plan of escaping that somebody started?
yeah. Did you guys gather inside the camp to try to escape, try to make plans to...
Well, yes, it is always talking that. The thing that we were trying to do was to worry the Germans. They probably could have put one guard out there, and if we'd have been all good boys, but we wasn't. They had to have several hundred of them. that all worked too, you see.
See, the more Germans that were pulled to the camp, the less that were on the front lines battling our troops. Brooke, how many years had you been in?
In the service,
Yeah.
tell you, I had my little farm. I had my mail route was Poposky, Minnesota, which isn't far from here. There's no town there anymore. I went in to end the war, and the day the war was ended, I started home. And I went back to the same place, and I got the same address today.
Eric,
When you were in the camp, did you have to get your head shaved in some camps?
once more, I'm referring to some of the things that we've talked about in concentration camps. Did you end up getting your head shaved? And
Not any closer than it is today. The lady that was going to take my picture for that newspaper article, she says, I'll take your picture as soon as you comb your hair. We weren't treated like the ones in the concentration camp. We were treated rough, but in a different way. They were put there to kill. They intended to kill them when they put them there, see. They had to give us a little consideration because we had a lot of their prisoners. Only we used their prisoners awful nice.
Maybe you should explain the difference between the prisoner of war camp and the concentration camp. They might be a little confused on that.
concentration camps, we knew from discussion who were some of the people that they had there. Ted? A lot of Jewish people. Jackie? Handicapped people. Rachel? Gypsies.
Now, is this one reason we're getting these questions on concentration camps?
Yeah.
This is the first I've run into this.
And so, and basically, we're studying a unit on World War II.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is these students are going to pretend that they were a kid that lived through World War II. And they can be from any country in the world. And some of them are thinking about being someone who survived a concentration camp. And others are thinking about being U.S. children who had parents that were in the war and so forth.
That's wonderful because of the fact that there's only one thing that I'd like to bring out here on Germany and its concentration camps. They necessarily wasn't all Jewish in the concentration. He put anybody there he wanted out of his way. Practically all the church old ministers and that ended up there because he had to get them out of the way. They had too much influence on the people.
They were the leaders of the communities.
Yeah, that's right. And I'm sure now, to be a teacher during Hitler's time, if this was Hitler's time, it would come to your school, one thing, that the kids should pray to God for something, and naturally it wasn't sitting in front of them. They'd pray to Hitler for something, and he would see it was sitting there. He tried to kill all of that within the child. And it worked for him. You see, his youth was the most radical bunch yet.
Marie?
So in the prisoners of war camps, they didn't really torture them as badly as the
As the concentration camps?
But was it their object to kill them?
Well, no, as he mentioned, she was asking once more kind of the difference between the prisoner of war camp and the concentration camp.
The prisoner of war camp came under the Geneva Conventions, which was drawn up between countries to protect the combat troops that was taken prisoner. Okay. And the concentration camp was the civilians, babies, everything that they wanted to get rid of. It was put there to destroy, actually.
So, and Marie, to answer your question, the prisoner of war camps were basically soldiers that were
It was
taken,
all soldiers. There was no civilians in them.
and concentration camps were civilians. Jessica?
Approximately how many people did you see either killed or that died?
She's asking about amount of death that was in the camp.
I think during the months I was in the camp, our particular camp, there was 5 or 6 only. Now, a few of them was more or less suicide because they tried to crawl the vents. They went crazy. Incidentally, there's one point I want to bring out, and I'm about forgetting it. If you adults remember when John McCain was running against Ronald Reagan, somebody in the opposition against McCain came out and said that he couldn't be the president of the United States because he was crazy. He'd been a prisoner of war. Was the reason he was crazy. Now this is the attitude that our so-called therapists and so on has given people to think. They've made them all think that you can't be detained as we were without going crazy. Do you think I'm crazy?
Absolutely.
I just want you to pass that along because it does burn us up awful bad.
I'm afraid we're running short of time. We're going to end up having to dismiss here. Is there a final thought that you want to leave the students with?
Not really, unless I would like to say this to you kids. You said here, you're 5th grade, all of you. The 5th graders interest me terrifically because of the fact you're going from a kid of 12 to a teenager. And I find it to be one of the most interesting groups of the kids and their ages.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, no, you can see it all over. And the questions is just as sensible that came from this group today as it will from the 10th grade and the high school. In fact, I got lists of them here. But we'll go as long as you feel.
I think we're going to have to wrap up in order to catch the buses.
Yeah, I knew that would happen.
Before